The world was ending, not in fire, not in flood, in silence, in cold. The temperature dropped so fast that entire forests vanished within generations. Rivers locked themselves under meters of ice. Animals that had roamed for millions of years disappeared, one by one, into extinction. And your ancestors? They were standing in the middle of it, naked, hungry, outnumbered. Here is what no one tells you. Your ancestors should not have survived. Every calculation, every environmental condition, every competitor they faced said they were finished. And yet, you exist, which means somehow, against everything, they made it through. There is a reason they survived when everything else died, and it has nothing to do with strength. You will understand exactly why in a moment. The Ice Age did not arrive like a storm. It crept in like a slow tide. Temperatures fell over thousands of years. Glaciers, walls of ice taller than skyscrapers, pushed south from the poles, swallowing land that had once been forest, swallowing the animals that lived there, swallowing entire ecosystems whole. At its peak, a third of the entire planet was buried under ice. Sea levels dropped by over 100 meters as the oceans themselves were slowly frozen into the ground. The landscape your ancestors had learned to survive in, the one their grandparents had taught them, simply ceased to exist. And the cold was not the only killer. The megafauna, the giant creatures that had coexisted with early humans for hundreds of thousands of years, began to vanish. Woolly mammoths, cave lions, giant ground sloths, species that weighed several tons and had survived dozens of previous cold snaps were now disappearing. Some were hunted, some starved. Some simply could not adapt fast enough. Your ancestors watched their food supply collapse in real time. Remember that question. Why did humans survive when creatures 10 times their size did not? Hold on to it. The answer will change the way you see yourself. At one point, the situation became so dire that geneticists now believe the entire human population on Earth collapsed to somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 breeding individuals. Think about that. Every human alive today, every single one of the 8 billion people on this planet, descended from a group so small it could have fit inside a single sports stadium. That moment is called a genetic bottleneck, and it nearly erased us entirely. So what happened? How did a small, fragile, slow-running, thin-skinned primate survive a catastrophe that killed off creatures built for cold, creatures with fur, creatures with size and speed and natural armor? The first answer is fire. But not fire the way you are thinking. Your ancestors did not simply discover fire during the Ice Age. They had known fire for hundreds of thousands of years before the glaciers arrived. What changed was what they did with it. They stopped treating fire as a tool for warmth and started treating it as the center of everything. Communities began organizing their entire lives around a single flame. Shelters were built facing fire. Sleeping arrangements shifted so the most vulnerable, children, the elderly, the injured, stayed closest to the heat. Fire became the world's first infrastructure. It was light in a world of lethal darkness. It was warmth in a world trying to freeze your blood solid. It kept predators at bay. It cooked food, which unlocked calories that raw meat could never provide. And it did something else, something far more powerful. It gave people a reason to stay together. Because here is what the cold was really doing to human groups. It was pulling them apart. When food became scarce, the logical survival instinct, the one every animal follows, is to scatter, spread out, cover more ground. Let the weak fall so the strong can continue. That is what almost every other species did. Your ancestors did the opposite. They pulled closer. They sat around a shared fire and did something no other creature on Earth was doing at that level. They talked. They planned. They shared knowledge across generations. An elder who had survived a previous cold snap could describe, in detail, what plants survived under snow, which animal tracks led to prey, which rivers stayed unfrozen longest. That information transfer, that invisible chain of knowledge passed from one human mind to another around a fire, was more powerful than any claw, any fur, any physical adaptation the Ice Age could demand. But knowledge alone was not enough. The second survival weapon was clothing, and the sophistication of it will surprise you. Early humans were not wrapping themselves in crude animal skins the way you might imagine. Archaeological evidence from Ice Age sites shows needles, actual bone needles, finely crafted, used to sew fitted, layered garments. These were not draped skins. These were engineered clothes. Clothes designed to trap body heat. Clothes with seams. Clothes that fit the human body the way modern winter gear fits yours. They had invented the concept of insulation tens of thousands of years before modern science gave it a name, and they did not stop at clothing. They built. Early humans during the Ice Age constructed shelters using the bones of mammoths, the largest structural material available, as frameworks, layering skins over them to create insulated dwellings that could hold heat through nights that dropped far below freezing. This was architecture, primitive by modern standards, but architecture nonetheless. At the 2-minute mark, here is where the story gets strange. Because while your ancestors were developing all of these survival tools, they were also doing something that had absolutely no survival value. At least, not on the surface. They were making art. Deep inside caves, in the flickering orange light of animal fat lamps, humans were painting horses, bison, handprints, geometric patterns, scenes of hunts, scenes of animals so beautifully rendered that modern artists have stood before them and wept. Why? Why, when every calorie was precious, when every hour of daylight meant survival, would a human spend time and energy making pictures in a cave? The answer took a long time to understand, and it reframes everything about what made humans different. The art was not decoration. It was communication. It was memory storage. It was spiritual architecture for a mind trying to make sense of a collapsing world. Those paintings were maps of migration routes, of seasonal animal behaviors, of resource locations passed down through image rather than word. They were also something else entirely. They were proof that the human mind, even under maximum survival pressure, refused to stop being human. Remember that strange behavior, the art, the rituals, the stories told around the fire. That seems to have no survival value? Here is where it gets really interesting. Groups that maintained strong social rituals, shared stories, shared symbols, shared beliefs, survived at higher rates than those that did not. Not because the rituals were magical, but because ritual creates cohesion. Shared belief creates trust. Trust allows cooperation at a scale no other animal had achieved. A group of humans who believed in the same story could coordinate hunts across vast frozen distances. They could divide labor, some hunting, some making tools, some preserving food, some caring for children and elders, without any single individual understanding the full system. They were running the world's first economy, the world's first civilization, and they were doing it to survive a frozen apocalypse. The third weapon was migration, but not random wandering. Ice Age humans moved with deliberate intelligence. They tracked seasons. They followed animal herds along predictable migration corridors. They mapped river systems that stayed liquid in winter. They shared this geographical knowledge, mentally, across hundreds of kilometers through networks of related groups who met seasonally to trade, to find mates, to share discoveries. This network of human groups, loosely connected across vast frozen landscapes, functioned like a distributed intelligence. If one group discovered a new technique for trapping prey under snow, that knowledge could spread across the network within a generation. No single human needed to be a genius. The network was the genius, and this is the part that should stop you cold. Because nothing your ancestors did to survive the Ice Age has left your biology. Every strategy, the cooperation, the knowledge sharing, the social bonding, the art making, the storytelling, is still running inside you, right now, today, when you feel the pull toward a group, when you need to share an experience to feel it fully, when you cannot stop yourself from telling a story, when you feel inexplicably soothed by firelight or a candle or a screen glowing in a dark room. That is not weakness. That is not distraction. That is the survival code of a species that refused to die. The Ice Age lasted for thousands of years. It killed the mammoth. It killed the cave lion. It killed dozens of species that were, by every physical measure, better equipped to survive cold than your ancestors were. But it could not kill a creature that figured out how to turn other minds into tools. That figured out how to store survival knowledge in stories and paintings and songs. That figured out that the warmest place on a frozen planet was not inside a fur coat. It was inside a circle of people who knew your name. The world froze, and your ancestors did the one thing the cold could never account for. They moved closer together.